Okay, so another one of the kind of ongoing stories has been aircraft noise. We don't like to use that word at Brisbane.
The purring of sky kittens.
The sky kittens. If you're unfamiliar with that joke, I can't explain. You're going to have to go back through past episodes and work it out yourself. Basically, Brisbane opened its new runway I think it was in 2020, in the kind of thick of COVID. And obviously this introduced all sorts of new flight paths. There was all sorts of a kerfuffle among residents that said it was much louder than it used to be. It was going over areas it wasn't previously. Jetstar is going to be focusing on new planes and not retrofits to curb the noise problem. Jake, tell us a little bit more about this.
Yeah, so this discussion had been going on with Jetstar, whether it was going to put these vortex generators on its A320s, which are flying into Brisbane. Now, basically, these can cut the noise. If you put them on the underside of the wings, these vortex generators can cut the noise caused by airflow over the circular pressure equalization vents for the fuel tanks. Lufthansa put vortex generators on its A320 starting in 2014, says that noise levels can be reduced by up to 2 decibels. Now, Jetstar extensively uses A320s, but it's instead of putting these vortex generators, retrofitting them onto the wings of the A320s, it said there's no business case for it. We're just going to focus on putting on our new, quieter A320neo and A321neo aircraft into Brisbane. Basically, a spokesperson said they've done this detailed assessment of fitting the vortex generators to the A320s, looking at the cost of installation, impact of flight schedule of taking these aircraft out of service, the extent of the benefits. They said these benefits are very limited, so they're not planning to proceed with the installation.
The problem with that, though, is that the addition of the Neos, they're coming relatively slowly, or they're coming in kind of drips and drabs. So what this won't do is give a kind of immediate solution to the problem. I know that the new generation of aircraft are supposed to be a bit quieter.
Apparently, these new LEAP engines on the Neos, they burn up to 20% less fuel than previous A321s and are up to 50% quieter.
Up to 50% is a big claim. Yeah. I'm not in. Well, I mean, that's what they say. I think that seems a bit too much for me. Not that we would have a problem with the sound of aircraft overhead.
The purring of sky kittens.
The purring of sky kittens. Yeah. Another joke from the glory days. The glory days of this show. Right, let's time is almost-ish beating us, but before we go, Jake, could you give us an update on the situation, as I'm sure everyone listening here knows, with the 737 MAX 9 and the door that blew off? What is the update on this? Because it seems like the FAA are very, very angry.
Yeah, the FAA they're not happy. I mean, last week there was this story coming out about apparently they're looking for these bolts. They were looking for the bolts that had blown out on the MAX 9's door plug. They were trying to figure out if they'd been properly installed. A bunch of these MAX 9s that were fitted with the door plug. Basically, there's an extra emergency exit on the MAX 9 that's not on the MAX 8. If the airline doesn't want to use that emergency exit, you put a plug in there to seal it up. That is what blew out on the MAX 9 over Portland a couple of weeks ago. And this... They're trying to figure out if these bolts were properly installed. United and Alaska, which are the two major US airlines that use the MAX 9, have been discovering that some of these bolts... Or some of these parts on the MAX 9s have not been properly installed, so those are being fixed up. As for the FAA, the FAA has been saying, look, this can't continue. This is not. It's the equivalent of CASA basically saying this is not a good look for the MAX 9. This whole thing has to stop. You were the one who wrote the story, Adam.
Yeah, one of the things that's very fascinating about this is that there's kind of two aspects. So on the one hand, in terms of there's different variants of the Max. There's the 8, the 9, and the 10. predominantly. And so the kind of the talk was that this only affects the MAX 9 because the shorter MAX 8, essentially it's shorter that it wouldn't even have that particular panel. And so for that reason, it's only the MAX 9 that's affected, that has been grounded by the FAA. But the other argument is that it's not necessarily about those specifics. It's about the culture at Boeing. And ultimately, all of these MAX aircraft are made in the same place by the same people, and it's inherently the same technology. Now, when we go back to when the MAX was last grounded, which I believe was the MAX 8, was grounded for 18 months, which was over the two crashes, as I'm sure you'll know, that killed, I think, just over 350 people. Now, that kind of that particular fault, which was a different thing, which was on a kind of, and I can't explain the science, it was on the kind of a maneuverable mechanism within the aircraft. But when the FAA investigated this, they were obviously able to investigate, they were able to see the technical issue, but it was more about the culture within Boeing that effectively this wasn't, it was essentially, well, it wasn't, it was covered up. And when FAA inspectors went to speak to Boeing when this thing was getting signed off in the first place, they were being hoodwinked. And so the idea that this company that at one stage was famous for its safety culture had got a little bit too greedy about profits.
Yeah.
And so, go on.
Well, this is. I found that what the quote from the statement. The FAA has said the situation should have never happened and cannot happen again.
Yes, it was a very, very, very terse statement. So yes, they said it should never have happened and cannot happen again. And then they spoke about saying. So they basically sent a letter to Boeing, which they published themselves as well, the FAA, and it said any discussions or written statements that you give will be given consideration in our investigation. However, if we do not hear from you within the specified time, our report will be processed without the benefit of your statement, which is really quite a brutal thing to say.
Yeah.
The FAA are obviously furiously angry with Boeing, particularly as this is panned out, because if this is, as it looks likely, a problem with those bolts, and they found other examples, then again, what it looks like is an example of a poor culture of kind of shoddy workmanship, that they are not as safety conscious as they used to be. And considering that the FAA allowed the MAX to fly again, obviously they fined Boeing $2.5 billion, but having given this aircraft a clean bill of health, this obviously reflects badly on the FAA too. They are obviously furious about this, and I can understand why. Another statement they made that they said a few days earlier was that the safety of the flying public and not speed will determine the timeline for returning the 737-9 MAX to service. So this is all going to be, they're obviously furious about this, and you could see it being the case that this aircraft is now going to be grounded for quite a long time.
It could be so, yeah. I've seen commentary just around the culture at Boeing where people are actually pointing the finger at this reverse merger that happened with McDonnell Douglas, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, which essentially saw Boeing take over McDonnell Douglas, but then the McDonnell Douglas leadership kind of got put into the leadership positions at Boeing. And, the attitude used to be, if it's not Boeing, it's I'm not going, was the slogan, which I think they sold and may still sell on stickers. But it used to be a company that was sort of run by the engineers. It was run by people who knew how to make planes. Yeah. And, who were focused on making the best and most safest planes they could. And when these guys came in from McDonnell Douglas, these, guys heavily steeped in, finance and that and all of that, they were more focused on extracting as much profit as possible, and, doing things as cheaply as possible rather than making their planes the best that they could be. There was an article that I read somewhere which was saying that the 737, that Boeing was originally, planning to make a new, like a new next generation plane to, I think, succeed. Was it the 767? So
they're effectively the last model, and I'm going to get crucified by our listeners if I get this wrong. So the last model was a 737-800. So the MAX replaced it. But yes, the MAX is not technically a new model. It's essentially another variant of the 737.
It's an update of the 737.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the last new plane type that Boeing has made has been the 787 Dreamliner.
Yes, exactly. And the reason that this is significant is that if you introduce a totally new aircraft, then obviously your pilots have to be trained up against from scratch. They have to pass get all the relative certificates, etc., etc. If you are simply updating it, then that process is an awful lot quicker and easier. So that was Boeing's incentive to do this, that rather than make a new aircraft, just update the old one.
It's also a lot cheaper from Boeing's perspective to, develop an entirely new aircraft from scratch rather than just update the model for the 737, which has been, flying for how many years now? Decades.
Yeah, exactly.
Like many years.
I should say to anyone listening, if you haven't seen it, there's a documentary on Netflix called the Case Against Boeing, and it's very, very good overview of this issue. Now, if anything, I think it's overly harsh on Boeing, but certainly it's this idea that from the kind of commercial airliner point of view, like you were saying there, Jake, they've got, whereas before it was kind of run by the turbo nerds, obsessed with safety. Now it's being run by the money men, and that's kind of the heart of what went wrong. But it does seem to me gobsmacking that this has happened, because this is almost for literally the door panel to fall off or to fly off is ridiculous.
And by the way, all these people who are saying that this is because of DEI, it's not because of DEI, it's because of finance bros thinking they know how to make a plane better than people who know how to make planes.
Wow. On that bombshell, we will go on.
There was one other interesting story that I think you covered this week, Adam. Speaking of the purring of sky kittens, what's this new supersonic plane?
Yes, I've been really eager to talk about this. So it's a bit
and yet you almost didn't.
I almost didn't know. So there are a number of companies around the world that are determined to try to recreate the Concorde or to create a new commercial supersonic jet. Most of these are looking to be like a kind of a business plane sort of size rather than the larger Concorde size. But at the moment, there's kind of 3 or 4 that are racing to do it. At the moment, it looks like NASA have raced ahead. So NASA, in collaboration with Lockheed Martin, have created what they're calling the X-59. Now, this is an actual aircraft. It's not a prototype, but it can only seat one person. But the unique thing about this is effectively they've designed it in such a way that it massively reduces the sonic boom. So for those of you that are unaware, when an aircraft crosses through Mach 1 and crosses the sound barrier, that creates a sonic boom. That potentially causes, glasses to explode and dogs to bark and the world to go crazy. And this effectively, many decades ago, caused a rule to be introduced almost internationally that said that if you create a sonic boom, you're banned from creating a sonic boom over land. And this was one of the reasons that ultimately finished off a Concorde, because it meant that predominantly it could only really fly transatlantically. It could go from London and Paris to New York because you need a big stretch of water. Yeah. And that meant they couldn't make more aircraft to do more routes. NASA, they don't believe they've solved this problem. They've said we've done it. In terms of because this whole thing is very secretive. So for those of you that aren't aware of the defence world, Lockheed Monkey, yeah. Oh dear, that's why I'm not on defence gear. Lockheed Martin.
Lockheed Monkey and its rival Northrop Gorilla.
Yeah, right. Lockheed, say it right. Lockheed Martin, and they have this skunk works facility in the Mojave Desert.
And of course, Lockheed Skunk has its monkey works facilities.
Yes. And obviously, this is next door to Roswell and whatever, and Area 51. But no, joking aside, this is where they do all the kind of top secret stuff. So you've had the very best people from Lockheed Martin, you've had the very best people from NASA, and they've said, can we come together and work out a way to do this? So the kind of revolutionary thing is the tip of the aircraft. Its nose effectively is 1/3 of the length of the fuselage. So it's like a kind of Pinocchio aircraft. But it also doesn't have a traditional cockpit windscreen, which is one of the reasons they're able to reduce the sonic boom. So effectively the pilot is just seeing through HD cameras. But the different shape means and I'm going to butcher the science here, as you have a kind of air come around to create the sonic boom, it disperses it more. So your sonic boom that would shatter a window potentially becomes what they call like a sonic thump, roughly the sound of a door slamming. So NASA believe they've now this technology. They say they've already flown it before. They're going to have the first proper test flights this year, and they're also going to fly it over communities. They've not picked them yet, but kind of specially selected communities in the US, and do their sonic thump, their quieter sonic boom, and then to get the information from communities of how much did it affect you, how bad was it or not. Now, so obviously this is just a one person aircraft, but if they can prove this works, they've kind of got the underlying technology to roll this out. Now, Lockheed Monkey, chimpanzee Lockheed Monkey, I don't care. Lockheed Monkey believe, and NASA believe, that by 2035 you would be able to have an airliner, a commercial-sized airliner that would be able to use this technology. Now, that is a game changer, because if Concorde... It's
absolutely bananas, Adam. People will go ape for it.
It is bananas.
I mean, given the circumstances, it'd be a real baboon to aviation.
It would be. So, yeah, but it's a 2035. Realistically, you could have largest aircraft that are able to fly at supersonic speeds without breaking the law. That paves a way for us to have larger fleets of these things, and it paves the way that potentially in 20 years' time, it wouldn't be as insanely expensive to fly supersonic as it was with Concorde, when it was purely the reserve for the extremely rich. So this could potentially be a game changer for aviation. Now, a lot of other companies are trying to do a similar thing. But nonetheless, it is a breakthrough moment, because Concorde's one of the only times in history where technology has really gone backwards.
Yeah, you'd probably prefer to fly in one of these than one of those space planes, wouldn't you, Adam?
Yes. Yes, you would. I'm just trying to think of a monkey pun. But again, one of the...
Do you need me to chimp in with a few?
Yeah, there you go. But anyway, one of the reasons this is quite fascinating is, again, the reason why NASA are getting involved with this is because you have got, between space and aviation, a kind of coming together of those worlds. So it's more of an aerospace industry now. Again, as Jake mentioned there, hypersonic space planes and hypersonic technology is something that we're very, very close to. So those worlds are very much blurring, and we're seeing more technological advancements in the last 3 or 4 years than we've almost seen in the last 3 or 4 decades, where you had the invention of a jet engine and then essentially things relatively stopped. But we're heading for another big leap in advancement.
I guess they're going to take a big swing at it, Adam.
Yes, that was one of the last few. I was teeing up a swing, Jake, but you got in there. I think we're pretty much out of monkey puns now.
Yeah, they're sort of dying on the vine.
We're dying on the vine, yes.